We're glad to have with us today one of the leaders in Congress, not just because he's the chairman, but he's a leader in progressive thought and action. He hails from the great state of Pennsylvania, and it wasn't by coincidence that the Vice President was in Pennsylvania yesterday with Ray LaHood to make the announcement that they made yesterday. Pennsylvania is at the crossroads of so many issues, including high-speed rail. It's also in the crossroads of a political debate surrounding infrastructure and the political future of the nation. So we are very pleased and honored to have one of the most respected congressmen from the state of Pennsylvania, one of the most knowledgeable members of Congress in the area of transportation, to speak to us today. Let's give Chairman of the Subcommittee of Rail a great round of applause, Congressman Bill Shuster.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. It's an honor to be here today. Thank you, Tom, and the High Speed Rail Association, Andy Coons, for your hard work and your efforts to keep high-speed rail at the forefront of discussions when it comes to future transportation. Also want to thank Leo Giacometto, who I don't know if he's here today, but he kept pounding on me saying, you got to come and you got to speak at this event, and Leo's a great guy. He's speaking before the group tomorrow on continued efforts. Great. I said Leo's a great guy, and I appreciate that. Also, I know that you heard from the big chairman today, John Mica. I think he was here this morning. John Mica, the chairman, and I are pretty much on the same page when it comes to high-speed rail. So you may hear me repeat some of the themes that you heard this morning. But as I said, the chairman and I work very closely and share our same view in many cases when it comes to high-speed rail. And I also should point out that people say I'm from Pennsylvania, and why is it John Mica, chairman of the committees, from Florida, and you know, you've heard about the high-speed rail in Florida, but why is the guy from Pennsylvania? And everybody thinks, well, Philadelphia, but I'm not from Philadelphia. I'm from the rural part of the state. We have a Amtrak service that comes through. It's not very frequent. High-speed rail is probably a long time away from coming through my part of Pennsylvania. But I'm here today because I believe that high-speed rail, we should be pursuing it in some parts of this country. And so, again, somebody coming from rural Pennsylvania, people say, why are you for high-speed rail? And I say, because I believe there are places in this country and, of course, in the world that have it, and it can be a success. And I think it's one of the solutions to our congestion problem, not only on the ground, on the highways, but as I'll talk a little bit more, and maybe you've heard from Chairman Mica, in the airways, in the skies over the Northeast Corridor. I believe that the President had good intentions when he put out that $10.5 billion of stimulus, but a couple of things came to light after he put the money out there. First and foremost was that he sprinkled the money all over the country. It was not focused anywhere, and so I don't believe it's going to get us significant movement towards high-speed rail in this country. In Ohio, the governor of Ohio rejected the money because my understanding is it was going to take the average speed of a train from about 36 miles an hour up to 39. If we continue to invest money, very scarce dollars that we have in projects like that, I don't think we're ever going to see high-speed rail in this country. And just as the President stated in his State of the Union message, he wants to get 80% of the population access to high-speed rail. I don't believe that's possible for a couple of reasons. One, because of the money. The money's not there to spend, again, in those small, isolated investments. I think it has to be focused. It has to be focused in a corridor that has the population density, that has the congestion problems, that can be a success. And if it's a success, then the American people, I believe, will buy into it, and then we move down the road, down the years, and try to set up high-speed rail in other corridors that it makes sense. But to try to get it to 80% of the country, again, I don't believe it's feasible. And there's vast stretches of this country that are wide open that you don't want to stop high-speed rail that frequently. And again, trying to get to 80% of the people, I don't think it's a wise policy that we should pursue. What I do believe is that, as I said, the Northeast Corridor, with home to about 20% of the nation's population, one of the densest corridor population in the United States and one of the densest corridors in the world, surpasses Europe and it rivals some of the population densities in Japan. So once again, I think that's a place we need to focus. And this money that was put out there, the 10.5, I'm back to that. We set up a criteria for the administration, the Department of Transportation, to go through and score these different investments around the country, and the best were to get the money. Unfortunately, the administration told us they did it, but they won't share the information with us. So I think that what may have happened is where it was politically expedient, where it was politically helpful, that's where some of the money went. And so we're going to spend a lot of this year having oversight, trying to figure out and finding out why those dollars went where they went. Because again, I have great doubts as to where they went, and again, the impact they're going to have getting us towards high-speed rail. The President proposed $53 billion over 6 years, and once again, it's going to be sprinkled throughout the country. We need to focus on a corridor that can have success. I come back to the Northeast Corridor. Again, it's one of the positives of the Northeast Corridor is the federal government, Amtrak, owns the lines, whereas you have to negotiate and deal with the freight rails, the rest of the country, and quite frankly, they're fighting high-speed rail because they believe it'll disrupt their freight service. So we have an asset in the Northeast Corridor. Again, I believe that Chairman Mike is fond of saying, quit sitting on our assets, and that's one of the greatest assets that we have in this country. So I'm opposed to just throwing money out there. With a very focused approach, I think we can see success and have true investment, not investing in the operations of Amtrak. Because we've seen with Amtrak over the last 40 years, and the argument can be made it was underfunded, but there's some serious problems in management over the years. And so I believe that we need to bring the private sector into this process for a couple of reasons. One, attract private capital. And we had a hearing in New York a week or so ago, Chairman Mike and I, and talked with some of the investment firms and some of the banks, and they're very interested in investing private capital in a Northeast Corridor high-speed rail system. They want, though, when they invest their money, they want to make sure they're going to get a return, and they want to be able to be at the management table to make sure that the system is run so that they get a return on that investment. And I think bringing those private sector ideas and innovations to the table is the way we make this a successful venture. And what do I mean by successful venture? I'm not sure. But I know that in Congress for the last 30 years or so, the debate has been, the Democrats say there's no passenger rail system in the world that isn't subsidized by the government, which is true. The Republicans say Amtrak's losing money, it's not been a success, it's a failure. And much of that is true. I believe that it's somewhere in the middle. I believe that when you talk about rail, passenger rail, we look at freight rail in this country. We have the only freight rail system in the world that doesn't require government subsidies to operate. The private sector's gone in there and, along with the government helping it along the way in the beginning, is now very profitable. I believe we can get to some level of, again, I say success. Does that mean does it make a profit? Does it make a profit above the rail? Does it break even? I think it can get to break even and stop requiring such huge injections of capital from the federal government. And as I said, once we have a successful system in place, the American people, I believe, will get behind it. Say, look, it works in the Northeast Corridor. So will it work in a corridor of the density of Milwaukee, Chicago, St. Louis? Will it work in Florida? Will it work in Texas? Will it work in the densely populated corridors across this country? And there's 10 or 11 of them that I believe have that potential. But until we focus on the Northeast Corridor, I don't believe it's ever going to happen. And the Northeast Corridor is prime, as all of you in this room, I think, know. It's interconnected to transit, city center to city center. 9 U.S. cities with commuter rail systems have transit in this country, and 5 are located in the Northeast Corridor. The 2 busiest subway systems, New York City being 1 and Washington 2, can connect to that system. And as I mentioned, the Northeast Corridor is almost 20% of the population. It is about 25% of our GDP in this country, and the congestion is just overwhelming. I was in Connecticut after our New York meeting, and the 60 miles of highway that runs, of 95 that runs through Connecticut, is the most congested part of the interstate highway system in the nation. And that happens to sit about halfway between New York and Boston. So there's a need there. I mentioned earlier the 70% of the chronic delayed flights in this country, they come out of the Northeast Corridor, and that has a ripple effect throughout air transportation across America. If we're able to get those planes out of the sky, get people into trains from Washington to Philadelphia, Washington to New York to Boston, we're going to alleviate a lot of that. Because I think it makes a lot of sense for people to get on trains. And I'm a poster child for riding trains. I can remember my father, I don't know if many people here remember, my father was the chairman of the Transportation Committee. And as he was working through, I remember saying to him one day about Amtrak and rail, I said, I'm never going to get on a train and go anywhere because I want my car. I want to get downstairs, get in the car, travel to and fro when I want to. Well, now, today, I don't travel to Philadelphia from Washington or from my district without getting on a train. Washington to Philadelphia, or in Pennsylvania, I drive to Harrisburg, I get on the train because I don't want anything to do with driving in Philadelphia traffic and dealing with the headaches I have to. And the state of Pennsylvania partnered with Amtrak and upgraded the lines there, the Keystone Corridor. They went from 65 miles an hour to 110 miles an hour. It's fast, efficient. I can be more productive on the train. So, I'm a convert to the fact if you've got good, efficient, reliable train service, whether it's high speed or whether it's lower speed, I think that the American people will get on it, get out of their cars to avoid that congestion that they have to deal with. And that's another number that's out there that we don't talk about enough in the debates. $115 billion a year are wasted time by commuters or fuel by sitting in traffic. $115 billion would be a significant investment to our entire transportation system, not just the Northeast Corridor and high-speed rail. So, again, that focus needs to be there on the Northeast Corridor, with bringing in the private sector, attracting capital, attracting their management skills to be able to see a high-speed rail, true high-speed rail, come to the Northeast Corridor. I think that the time is ripe for it, but as I mentioned, the dollars are scarce, and that's why I think we need to be able to attract the private sector into this endeavor. And without it, again, I don't believe we're going to get there. Just to briefly touch on, transportation across this country, the $115 billion that we waste. What are we going to invest in our transportation system, whether it's high-speed rail, highways, aviation, our ports, all are critical to this nation, to our competitiveness in the world. And I believe that as we move forward, we're going to be doing a highway bill. I believe, as the chairman, I don't believe, the chairman has instructed me to have a very robust rail title in there, dealing with passenger rail and dealing with some of the situations we deal with in freight, so that when we move forward on that, we're going to be looking at all modes of transportation. But we've got to cut the red tape. Eliminate some of these outrageous environmental regulations that slow the process down, making sure that the legal challenges are limited, because it just takes time, costs money, and at the end of the day, we spend billions of dollars that we don't need to spend because of these, whether it's environmental laws or whether it's frivolous lawsuits trying to stop a project. We need to make sure that we're doing these things. And in transportation across the board, private-public partnerships, I think, are extremely important. As you mentioned, Pennsylvania, we were sort of the epicenter for our transportation dollars. They couldn't raise the gas tax, and there's no appetite here in Washington to raise the gas tax, so that's not going to happen. Didn't happen in Pennsylvania. They worked to toll 80 in the northern tier. Didn't didn't work out. The Pennsylvania Turnpike, they tried to put that forward as a public-private partnership, and I know my good friend Andy Giorgiano is back here, and he gave a presentation today, Ingersoll, Buchanan, and Rooney, about their involvement in that public-private partnership, as well as two others in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. They brought it to the table, but the legislature was unable to move forward to make those things happen. So those are the things we have to do in transportation. And as a Republican, I talk to my colleagues almost on a daily basis about why we need to invest, and I believe investing in transportation truly is an investment. It's not just spending money, because when you build a transportation asset, it's there. We can see it, and we get a return on it. Year after year, property values go up, commerce grows. So there's a true investment there. And so as I talk to my colleagues, I remind them that I think it's pretty clear in the Constitution that transportation is something the federal government should be involved in. Article 1 of the Constitution states that the enumerated powers of Congress are provide for the common defense, regulate interstate commerce and foreign commerce, and build post offices and post roads. I think all three of those deal directly with transportation and the commerce of this country. Post roads are the highways and byways of the 1780s and 90s, and today there are highways. So it's clear to me in the Constitution that it's a responsibility of the federal government to invest in those. Madison makes the case in the Federalist Papers about connecting the country and how important it is to invest in those type of activities, transportation, roads, that are going to connect our country, that are going to improve our competitiveness. And as Republicans, I'm often reminding my colleagues that three of the greatest transportation projects in the United States history, first the Transcontinental Railroad. Lincoln didn't just build it it wasn't a recession, it was in the middle of the Civil War, our greatest challenge to our nation's history, and Lincoln plowed through and made sure that he connected this country with rail, which really was the connecting force and what brought us into the industrial age. Second, the Panama Canal. Teddy Roosevelt, another good Republican, built the Panama Canal. And finally, Dwight Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, built the interstate highway system. So as a Republican, it's our tradition to build assets. Sometimes people accuse us of being the party of big business, but we consider ourselves to be the business-minded party. And if you're going to invest in assets, that's what businesses do. They invest in their assets, they rebuild their assets, they make sure that those assets are going to continue to operate and have a return to us that gives us the prosperity that we in America have today. And if we don't continue to invest in them, the Chinese and other countries are going to eat our lunch, as they have been for the past decade or so, and America slowly slipping economically. So I believe that investing in roads, high-speed rail, and the entire transportation system is vitally important to the prosperity of America. So again, I want to thank you very much for having me here today, and I'm more than happy to take any questions. And I will correct you on one thing. I think you said that how important the Senate is. I would tell you how inefficient the Senate is, because they don't get a whole lot done over there unless their backs are up against the wall.
Well, we're going to change that and try to get some things done in this term with your leadership in the House and some progressive thinkers in the Senate side.
Thank you.
A few questions with the chairman of the Rail Subcommittee, please.
Man, oh, okay, here we go. I thought this was going to be an easy crowd.
Jim Richardson with Forest City. How do you get everybody on the same page? All right. I mean, you get messages coming out that, we got $53 billion. Then you hear today nobody's going to pass it. You got no money. So how do you do that?
Well, I think the times we face today, you're not just going to get the federal government to plow in $53 billion or whatever the project is. You've got to look at new ways to do this. And the Europeans for years for the last decade or so, have gone to the private sector and said, we need you in on these different transportation projects. And I think that's the way we start to get. My colleagues on the other side, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them think, the federal government's the has to do it. Some of them have started to, and in discussions with them, believe that let's get the private sector involved. I had a discussion today with someone from the White House, and they said the president is at least talking about getting the private sector involved. And on my side of the aisle, if we can get the private sector involved, there will be a majority of us, I think, a significant majority will say, well, okay, let's try it. Because we've gone down the path of purely government investment, and it hasn't worked. So if the private sector comes in, I believe there's enough on my side that we can get something done.
I would agree, and I just believe that you need to get the private sector involved sooner than later.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we're having, John Micah is having a heck of a fight right now with trying to change the way the rail system in this country works. We, in the last passenger rail, the PREA bill we passed, I don't know, 2 years ago, he got in there a provision that would put an RFP out for the Northeast Corridor to find out, because we don't really know how much it's going to cost. And I believe until you get the private sector, a couple of consortiums or people coming in and saying, okay, let's look at this, and you get a couple of bids, and all of a sudden it's $100 billion from 2 or 3 different sources, that's probably the price tag, or $50 billion or whatever it is. But the FRA has completely ignored that. I was able to put in a provision that said, let's take 2 of Amtrak's lines that are losing significant amount of money, and let's put it out to the private sector, and let's see if they want to come in and operate it, and let's figure out how to do this. And again, they've completely ignored it. And on this issue, bringing people together, it's going to take the labor movement in this country, rail labor, to come to the table and say, yes, let's do this. And I look at the numbers on jobs at Amtrak over the last 10 years. They've lost 10,000 jobs, 29,000 to 19,000 people working on the rail. Some of that, maybe a good bit of that, is due to innovation and technology. But it's going to continue to go that way unless we figure out how to get high-speed rail in the Northeast Corridor. When all of a sudden, instead of us just having 10 million people riding Amtrak in the Northeast Corridor, maybe it's 15, 20, 30 million. I believe the numbers would be staggering. If you can get from Washington, D.C. to New York in 90 minutes, nobody's going to get on an airplane. And a lot fewer people are going to drive their cars.
No, you're right, and your developments will help support your market share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, in the back there.
How do we get the RIF loan program?
I meant to mention that. One of the things we're looking at in this rail title in the highway bill, that's something nobody's talked about a whole lot. Chairman Micah and I have talked about. First of all, for those of you who don't know, the RIF is basically for the short lines, and the class 1s, I guess, can use it, but really the short lines are the ones that try to use it. It's a $35 billion fund that I think there might be $10 or $15 million loaned out. The OMB, Office of Management Budget, hate the RIF fund, so they don't want to let it go forward. So what we're talking about doing is number one, making it easier for the freights to use, but also looking at adding in there that maybe passenger rail, high-speed rail in particular, to be able to tap into that fund, low-cost loans, to be able to utilize that to build passenger rail, freight rail capacity in this country. I think it's something that we need to take a look at, and we are going to take a look at it. Oh, thank you. We have a hearing on February 17th concerning some of those issues, so any of you that are interested, certainly love to have you in the committee room.
We have time for
yes,
one
sir.
more question.
Yeah. I wanted to follow up on that on RIF. I agree with you completely, and Mr. Micah, on the Northeast Corridor and the approach that you're taking there. Outside of the Northeast Corridor, you've got a lot of emerging corridors which have been, they're not really high-speed rail, but they're emerging, like the Keystone Corridor, the Northwest Corridor, California Capital Corridors, and we need something in the rail title that will help those corridors to develop and to emerge. And I think the idea of PPPs through state authorities is exactly right. So I'm hoping, I guess, that you'll consider that, make them eligible for RIF loans, right, that sort of thing, as a part of your rail title.
That's exactly the types of thing we're looking at doing. And I'll mention, the Keystone Corridor is great. Does it need high-speed rail? I'm not so sure that corridor is ever going to be a corridor. 110 miles an hour. Is it really imperative that I get from Harrisburg in 90 minutes or get it down to an hour and 5 minutes? I don't know that I want the cost benefits there. So there's places, and I'll also say this, and potentially getting in trouble with the chairman and the former chairwoman. She usually gives me an earful when I don't agree with her. And we agree much of the time when it comes to rail. The Florida case, the Tampa to Orlando, that's what's ready. That's where the investment's made. But everybody I talk to in Florida says the money maker, potential big money maker, is Miami to Orlando, because Disney World and the largest cruise port in the world, millions and millions of people coming in there. But Tampa to Orlando was ready. I don't think that's a good way to invest money. If I was a business before, I wouldn't invest just because, okay, this is ready and I may make money, I may lose money. I'm not going to invest that way. We need to make investments, just like I said about the president of the stimulus, the president on this high-speed rail, and in Florida. Let's make investments where we are going to succeed, where we have a high probability that we will succeed. And so we're going to move forward with Florida. I wish it well, but I think at the end of the day, if it's built, it won't be successful. Won't be highly successful, maybe I should say, until you connect Orlando to Miami.
We'll go to both.
Thank you.
Let me take a moment, Congressman, and applaud you and your family for your efforts in high-speed rail and just the rail and transportation industry over the years. I was speaking to the audience earlier about this being a legacy project, and you're a living example of that. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge my son, who's here today and working in this summit, and recognize him, because this is a legacy project. We're working for the next generation, just like your dad did so much.
When I also tell you this, when I talk, my dad's still living, and he gives me advice when I ask for it, and he gives it me when I don't even ask for it. But when I talked to him about his success in Congress and the successes that he had, he said the one great failure he had was not being able to solve the problem with Amtrak and making sure we have a somewhat of a viable, whether it was a national system or a corridor system that was viable. So I guess that's kind of a charge to me to make sure that I continue to work on this.
Well, this is my son Thomas, who's here. Give him a round of applause.
Hey, Thomas, we can commiserate together about a successful father.
Well, my father was one of the first African-American lobbyists in town. He worked with Adam Clayton Powell and Bill Gray and others in Congress. And so I used to carry his bag around Capitol Hill, and my son's carrying my bag now. So this is a legacy piece that I'm proud to be a part of, and proud to be working with you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.